As I lay my head upon your breast, and I live my life at your behest, Lord, may I hear your beating heart. As you breathe your life into mine, fill me replete with your new wine, Lord, may I hear your beating heart. I've heard you ask, do you love me? Lord, you know I do. You surely know this heart of mine, Lord, I do love you.
Hi Gillian.
Hello Bishop, how are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm great in this beautiful setting.
Yeah, it's alright, isn't it? I want to talk to you about life. And it gets a bit messy sometimes.
It does. We're always in a mess of varying degrees, aren't we? But life's beautiful here at the moment. Lovely families walking around, enjoying the sunshine. There's a family of ducks enjoying life. But then we have events here, and they're beautiful, arts, celebrating life. And then the evening comes and we can have 3 pubs here, fights break out, that gets messy. We have schoolies, and that's generally well controlled. It's an alcohol-free zone, but as we know, drugs can creep in and that gets messy here too. So life is contrasts.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What about, without wanting to be too personal, there must be messiness about your life sometimes.
Oh yes. Don't look at my house. But yes, life's not always easy, is it? My life, it can be messy. I'm called away to England a lot of times. My mother lives in England, and her husband, my stepfather, were in a real mess. And I was called away, and my life felt very messy, and I felt really alone, distant from my family here in Australia. And it was a really dark time for me, but I drew comfort from the Lord. It was a really spiritual time for me, and I'm so glad I went through that mess, you know, because it brought me out into the light. And I just knew that the Lord was with me, guiding me, and so I could turn to Him in prayer at night time, and then in the day everything came clearer and the mess moved away for a while. Yes.
For a while? But it comes back.
It comes back, yes. So we constantly adjusting, aren't we? But we constantly turning and saying, well, where are you taking me now, Lord? What are we going to do?
It seems to me that sometimes we can actually talk as if life is meant to be smooth, and all the time it's smooth, it's life, but when it's not, it's an interruption.
Interruption, yes.
You know?
Yeah.
But that's not right, surely.
No, well, I think we have to go through these messy times and that to enjoy the calm times.
Yeah. And when you're feeling a bit kind of messed up, what's the predominant feeling that you have?
Well, for me, it's usually anxiety, because I don't know what's going to happen. I like a bit of order, so I'm anxious that things will turn out badly as well. Yes.
Yeah. So it's something about control.
Control, yes.
Yeah. And who's in control?
Who's in control? We like to think we are, don't we? But we're not.
Indeed. But I mean, around here, And I've been here when there's been schoolies going on.
Yes.
And that's really quite well controlled.
It is, yes.
So some control
Yes.
is obviously okay, but you can't control everything.
No, we can't. We've got no control over those ducks over there at the moment. They're free to wander.
Yeah.
And I guess for us, we can turn to our Lord and know that He's there with us. But other people haven't got that luxury, have they? They don't know the Lord, and so they're not able to come out of the mess like we do. I guess that's the difference.
Yeah. And for some, there's the whole feeling that the Christian faith is a little bit about escaping from the mess rather than living
in the mess. But no, we're really touched in reality, aren't we? Yes, it's just how we deal with the mess. Yes.
Last week we were talking about turning to God, and I suppose, what is it that we get when we turn to God? You see, when we turn to Him, what God offers us is His life in its fullness. It's what Jesus came to share with us. And we often think about that in terms of the banquet, the party. And that's great and fun and wonderful. I would wish that those kind of characteristics were more displayed for us when we assemble for worship. But of course, there's got to be more to it than that. Surely it's not just something about an eternal party that might await us in the future. What does turning to God for life in its fullness mean for people whose life is in the raw, whose lived experience is that life is something completely different from being a party? People who are pouring out of the pubs, or sleeping on the beach, or sleeping homeless on the park bench. The whole idea about life in its fullness and comfort in the future, this can't be good news. If that's what the good news is about, how can it be good news for those who dwell on rubbish dumps in Kenya, Mexico and the Philippines, or the children that are cared for in motel accommodation all the way around us here, or the young woman who lives on the beach, or the one addicted to drugs or alcohol, who, for all I know, might actually live next door? What is this life that when we turn to Him, God constantly offers us? Let's return to the text before us this week. Famous, isn't it? I wonder which character you identify with. Look at verse 13. How many of you highlighted a word in this verse? Luke uses a word that our translation renders a distant country. Now, of course, any other country is a distance from here. Our nearest neighbours are a long way across the ditch. But that wasn't the case, and still isn't actually, in the Holy Land. A distant country could describe a location just 100k away, the place where another race dwells, the place on ancient maps where the cartographer wrote, "Here be dragons." The younger son went to Victoria. No wonder he was lost. The word Luke uses could equally be translated region. He went to another region. Distant due to the fact that the people there behaved in a strange way or had peculiar customs. He put himself beyond the pale because he associated with strangers, went to live with foreigners, talked to people of another denomination or even another religion. He went to another place. He put himself somewhere different. A question it is often good to ask ourselves is, where do I put or place myself, and with whom? Where would I locate myself? This is a subject we'll come back to another week. There are two other things in this verse 13.
that I think are key to the matter of life in its fullness. Firstly, the issue of possessions, or as this translation has it accurately, property. The same word here as Luke used in verse 12. There the son gathers together all his property, and here in verse 13, he squanders it, or to put it another way, scatters it. Gathered and then scattered. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. After the feeding miracles, Jesus tells the disciple to gather up all the fragments. Jesus in the high priestly prayer in John's Gospel tells the Father that he has gathered them together, not one being lost save the one who chose to be so. The parables of the kingdom reach a climax when the agents are sent out to invite or even compel those on the highways and byways, those in foreign places, to come to the banquet, that all might be gathered in. Send labourers to the harvest, for all need to be gathered in. Gathered in and not scattered. The boy does one. He gathers his property, his things, his artifacts, things that are important to him. But then, life in its fullness is to be gathered in. It is to be drawn into the mystery of God and held by him eternally. But the holding of God is never against our will. We are not imprisoned, but embraced by him in such a way that the door is always open, both for us to leave and, very importantly, for others to come. The door is always open, and both of these are consequential on that open door. I can leave, and others can come. Over one consequence, I have the choice, but not concerning the other. The fullness of life is life in communion, gathered into the unity of God, like chicks under the wings of the hen. The freedom to graze, to come and to go, to peck around in both the feeding trough and the dust. There is a prayer sometimes used at the offertory in the Eucharist. It asks that as the grain and grapes were once scattered on the fields and on the vines are now come together in the bread and wine offered, so might we all be gathered into the kingdom, the fullness of the banquet. This is indeed the fullness of life and our destiny. However, just as the Eucharist is a foretaste of that heavenly banquet, so our lives should also be. By the way that they become so, the way our lives ought to be a foretaste of the eternal banquet, is as per that prayer, and in a way, the action of the younger son. For we come to the Eucharist and are gathered in as God's possessions or property, and then sent out, if you like, scattered back into the fields and vines, highways and byways of life, then to return to the assembly of the holy ones, which is both the summit and the source of all that we are and all that we do. Living Eucharistically is to gather and to scatter, to go and to come, to offer and receive, to be both transformed ourselves and transforming for others. Life in its fullness in the raw reality of the human condition, wherever we find ourselves, knowing that God longs for all to be transformed and gathered in. The last thing in verse 13 has a sting in its tail. It contains what for me is one of the defining characteristics that life in its fullness, no matter what its physical conditions might look like, really is. The word Luke uses to describe the behavior of the younger son whilst he is living distanced from his father, translated squandered in our text, could equally be rendered that he lived without control. The original word has a sense of carelessness, but in origin it does not suggest sexual excess. This is the interpretation placed critically upon the younger son by his elder brother. Life in its fullness, no matter what conditions surround it, is lived in generosity towards others by thinking, judging and acting concerning what is best in them, about them and for them. Life in its fullness is surely about turning to God as I am, where I am and how I am, and accepting his call to be gathered in by him. The gathering itself being part of the transformation God wills for me. The transformation that is essential if I am to be brought to the eternal heavenly banquet. For I cannot bring degradation, separation, and isolation with me into unity, holiness, and communion. I leave it behind as I am gathered in. This is the promise. Whether we live on the pinnacle of power, wealth, or rubbish, for turning to God, we come to life in its raw, unbounded reality. And that is that we are loved, both into existence and into eternity.